the first time on TV. The stories and reports of the people who fly and the aircraft they fly. And you are invited in an exciting, pulse-pumping new television series designed for everyone who has ever gazed skywards and dreamt of slipping the bonds of Earth. The Aviators.
This week on The Aviators, we visit the biggest air show on Earth in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. We take a look at a World War II trainer, the Tiger Moth biplane. We check out a cargo moving giant, the C-5M Super Galaxy. We talk to Miracle on the Hudson hero, First Officer Jeff Skiles. And we take you inside an airplane cockpit when things go terribly wrong. From the Boundary Bay Airport, this is The Aviators.
It's the world's biggest celebration of aviation. Singles, twins, ultralights, heritage planes, fighter jets, helicopters, gears and gadgets. If it's aviation, it's here. We're in Oshkosh, and this is AirVenture.
Tough to really get the sheer magnitude of AirVenture. As you can tell with the air show going by, it really is aviation's family reunion. Think about 1,400 acres, 10,000 airplanes, more than 500,000 people, 800 exhibitors, even 1,100 portable toilets. I mean, it's this kind of size. This event is bigger than anything we ever thought of before. And it really became something that was a presentation for the entire world of flight.
Can you tell us a little bit about the roots of AirVenture?
Sure. It started in 1953, just 9 months after the organization was born, as just a little fly-in as part of a Wisconsin air show down in Milwaukee. It continued to grow. It moved to Rockford, Illinois in 1959, and then in 1970 moved here to Oshkosh. So this is our 40th year in Oshkosh, and it has grown to be one of the world's largest aviation events and the world's largest fly-in. Very early on, there was a culture to the gathering that made it very special. It didn't matter what you flew, what airplane you liked, what you wanted to fly someday, you were welcome here. It was not just exclusively for warbirds or home builds or anything like that. It was for everybody because we all enjoy flying.
A strange aerial creature made its appearance over the skies of Oshkosh as the Virgin Galactic VMS Eve flew its maiden public flight. On board was billionaire Sir Richard Branson, who is developing Virgin Galactic, the world's first spaceline. Developed by pioneering aeronautic designer Burt Rutan, the quad jet engine craft will be the mothership to launch the space module Spaceship Two. The first carry flight is scheduled to take place at the end of this year. The military is always at Oshkosh, and we had a look at the Boeing C-17 Globemaster. With its first flight in September 1991, the C-17 is one of the U.S. Air Force's newest tactical airlifters. Powered by the same engines as the Boeing 757, the C-17 can be used to carry troops, supplies, and even a 70-ton M1 Abrams tank.
This was my first time at Oshkosh, and I am literally in sensory overload. Be you student pilot, airline pilot, hangar pilot, you need to come to Oshkosh.
Flying and navigation today have been revolutionized by technology. That applies to aircraft in all classes of aviation. It can be easy to forget what flying was like just 80 years ago. The de Havilland Tiger Moth biplane is an example of one of those early aircraft that is still seen around the world today. With a top speed lower than that of most cars, just 109 miles per hour, and a range nearly half that of a Cessna 172, the Tiger Moth was originally designed as a trainer and was built in the thousands around the world. Aviators correspondent and Tiger Moth owner, Curtis Arnold, had a chance to chat with fellow Tiger Moth owner, Steve Gray, about the aircraft's history.
30 years after the Wright brothers learned to fly in 1903, the British military was looking for a new aircraft to train the next generation of pilots. This is a Tiger Moth. This was developed in the 1930s and used to train thousands of pilots for things like World War II. Stephen Gray is one of the pilots of this aircraft. Stephen, tell us a little bit about what this airplane is like to fly.
This airplane's a joy to fly. It's difficult to fly, so it's a great trainer for pilots because they have to have constant attention to the controls. If the pilot is not on top of the controls at all times, the airplane will do what it wants. So you have to be in control of it at all times, and it makes you a really good pilot. You have to feel the airplane when you're flying it, and it's very enjoyable to fly when you finally achieve perfection with the airplane.
So do you know how many of these were built and where they were built around the world?
I know that they were built in Toronto, Ontario. They were built in England, of course, and also in Australia. And as far as I know, there was somewhere around 16,000 aircraft built.
The Tiger Moth was an extremely prevalent trainer throughout the British Commonwealth prior to and during World War II. When compared to its American equivalent, the Stearman Model 75, the Tiger Moth had some significant differences that kept its pilots on their toes.
This aircraft was a much lighter aircraft. It's a smaller aircraft. It has a less powerful engine, but more importantly, it's a less stable airplane, and that's what made the pilots really good. The pilots required constant attention on the controls, and as a result, they had to really feel the airplane to fly it. Most of the other airplanes that were used as trainers in the war didn't require so much skill from the pilot.
And so that made them better off as they moved up to the next aircraft. So what would they do if they learned to fly a Tiger Moth? They would move on to what kinds of aircraft as they progressed?
Well, the second trainer that they would move on to, the more advanced trainer, would be the airplane like the Harvard. And that was a larger airplane with a larger engine, of course, and retractable landing gear. And it was more like the fighters that they would eventually fly.
Part of a team of aerobatic pilots, Curtis and Steve do formation Tiger Moth flying in various air shows around Canada. As part of the 2009 Cross-Canada Century flight, Curtis brought the Tiger Moth into Fredericton, New Brunswick, where the colorful biplane attracted quite a crowd.
A pretty warm reception, I would say. We've flown the airplane a couple of times today, and there's been lots of people taking pictures of it, and we haven't been able to get close to it all day because everybody else is enjoying it, which is great. That's what it's for. Well, we think the Centennial flight's a pretty significant thing in Canada, and we think that the Tiger Moth played a pretty important role in the history of aviation in this country. There were thousands of them produced at Downsview in Ontario, and thousands of pilots in Canada learned to fly in these and flew them after the war themselves at home. So for us, this was an opportunity to bring a Tiger Moth back to the birthplace of aviation in Canada.
Flying a Tiger Moth into Sydney, Nova Scotia was physically strenuous thanks to the plane's entirely hands-on controls. Curtis enlisted the help of fellow pilot Dave White to help get the job done.
It's worth noting that Dave has an airplane that would have done this very simply in one hop IFR over all that bad weather yesterday. Instead, he chose to try the real thing, and 9 hours, 2 days, and 5 fuel stops to get here from Brampton. So Tiger Moth isn't much of a cross-country aircraft. We do 75 knots. We have to stop every 150 miles for fuel, and it's pretty fatiguing. You know, if you do 8 hours in this airplane in a day, you're whipped at the end of that day. And coming through the mountains, we were lucky the winds were calm, but the air currents are such that you're on top of the airplane all the time to keep the blue side up.
Dave has a particularly unique way of looking at flying a Tiger Moth.
Flying a Tiger Moth's a lot like standing on a basketball. If you let go of it for, a second and a half or 2 seconds, it will be upside down. It's not what I would call a stable platform. I would never want to fly at IFR, certainly.
It's a scary thought.
But you don't let go of it while you're flying. But it's certainly a lot of fun. It's a whole different flying experience.
This, my friend, is why not everybody flies Tiger Moth.
This is the reason Cessnas have starters.
Sitting open to the air, Tiger Moth pilots of the day felt privileged just to have a small windshield, let alone a fully enclosed cockpit. However, Curtis feels that this is one of the benefits of flying a Tiger Moth.
So a Tiger Moth is a little more challenging to fly than some other of the modern aircraft, but it's a great deal of fun to be out here with the wind blowing around in your hair. You can actually smell the farmer's fields in the summertime. It's wonderful.
As we continue to move forward in aviation with faster engines, composite materials, and full-glass cockpits, it's easy to lose track of just how far we've come. The Tiger Moth is not an easy aircraft to fly. It's a physically and mentally taxing aircraft, but it gives the pilots a chance to return to the roots of aviation and to experience the Earth in a very visceral way that few other aircraft can offer. We at the Aviators believe that this tough old bird will be around for another 80 years. Providing rapid air mobility, the U.S. Air Mobility Command are the pack mules of the United States Air Force. The AMC's 136,000 personnel operate aerial fuel tankers, VIP aircraft such as Air Force One, and heavy airlifters such as the C-5M Super Galaxy. The C-5M is the latest in the C-5 line of aircraft, which dates back to 1961. With upgraded electronics and new engines, the C-5M is a cargo-moving giant. The aviators had a chance to sit down with C-5M pilot Lieutenant Colonel Mike Simo.
I started flying the 172. I have 39 hours in single-engine propeller aircraft. The Air Force trains its pilots, and I'm very grateful for that training. I went off to pilot training and learned how to fly T-37s for 6 months and T-38s, which is actually on the right side of the aircraft, and I did fly those for 6 months supersonic. After that 1 year of pilot training, I went on to C-21s, and I flew Learjets for 3 years for the Air Force, and then I transitioned to C-5s in 1995. I have approximately 3,000 hours in the C-5 and been doing it for 14 years.
The C-5M can go anywhere. At maximum takeoff weight, the minimum runway length is just 8,300 feet. For landing, it's even less at a mere 4,900 feet. This allows the Super Galaxy to put its 225,000-pound payload where the troops need it when they need it.
Well, the most incredible thing about C-5 is the amount of cargo it moves and the distance it moves it in. You know, moving 120,000 pounds of cargo, to put that in layman's terms, I've moved 5 MRAPs at a time from Charleston, South Carolina, where the factory is at, to Baghdad or Al-Assad, Iraq. And that is one of the most satisfying things we do, is delivering that equipment in a timely manner to our soldiers. That is the job of this aircraft, and that's where I take my most pride from.
Featuring full-width cargo doors at the nose and tail, the C-5M is the largest aircraft in the U.S. fleet, 6 stories high with a maximum takeoff weight equal to 56 elephants. It's so big, a lot of people question how this aircraft can even fly.
We get that a lot. How can it fly? It is basic physics. It's based on wing surface. We have a very large wing surface. The slats and the wings are designed for short field takeoffs and short field landings to allow us to do it at slower speeds. But as those retract, they're swept wing aircraft that allow us to go 0.77 Mach, which is 77% speed of sound as our cruise, all the way up to 0.825. And that equates to about 525 miles an hour. So the range of the aircraft is incredible, and that allows us to take all the way up to 225,000 pounds of cargo on the floor. The max I've taken is 180,000, and our normal load is about 120,000. But with the new M model, with the new engines, the power, and the fuel savings, allows us to go direct from Dover, Delaware to Baghdad with 120,000 pounds of cargo. And that's the amazing part of the aircraft. It accomplishes its mission.
While the C-5 has been around since the early 60s, the C-5M model is the most recent modernization of the aircraft. Several modifications were made to the existing C-5s to extend the life of the aircraft. The new engines on the C-5M have a lifetime 5 times longer than their predecessor. This has a combined effect of saving the taxpayer money while making the aircraft more reliable for the troops on the ground.
In addition to the maintenance reliability of the engines and the aircraft, we also have additional power, 22% more thrust out of the engine. They're also what they call D-rated, which they're rated at 60,000 pounds of thrust, and they're D-rated at 50,000 pounds of thrust, which allows us to take off at higher temperatures with that thrust. So now we take off on shorter runways with more fuel, more cargo, and carry it farther. And that's allowing us to skip the en route destination. We're always attempting to work with our partners, our engineering partners and our contractors to improve the airplane, and that's our goal. We're always improving, always making it better, more maintainable, always trying to save money.
Maintaining a fleet of tactical airlifters is not cheap. The C-5A and B models cost over $167 million each. Upgrading these aircraft to the M models is estimated to cost taxpayers $13 billion. This is one of the reasons Lieutenant Colonel Simo feels air shows like AirVenture are so important.
This is your aircraft. It's not my aircraft. They just let me fly it. And it's very interesting to show people what they get for their taxpayer money. And it's very important to show them that we are using every dime to squeeze as much as we can out of each airplane, save every drop of fuel, and move the cargo to the troops. And that's who we really serve, is the young soldier downrange. When we deliver that MRAP, when we deliver that Humvee, that's what you get from us. And that's interesting to show all the people that are out here what we do and how we do it.
Jeff Skyle is famous for his role on Miracle on the Hudson, but today we're going to talk with Jeff about him as a pilot. Jeff, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, thank you.
How did it all begin? How did Jeff get into aviation?
Well, my parents were both pilots, you know, my dad was a college professor. They weren't professional pilots, but my dad had a commercial instrument. My mother had a private license. And my whole time growing up, they had airplanes. They had a Piper Tri-Pacer and later a Cessna 182. So, you know, from the first moment that I can remember, I wanted to be a pilot. I never wanted to be anything else.
Is there one moment that you can remember during your training that really sticks out as sort of that defining moment? Yes, I want to be an airline pilot.
I don't really think that there was any particular defining moment that I can recall, that I can look back on, that, you know, made me want to become a pilot. I just always wanted to be one. I mean, all I ever read when I was a kid was about flying airplanes. I remember when the Flying magazine would come in the mail and I'd have it read cover to cover by nightfall. You know, it's always been something I've been excited about.
So we're curious, Jeff, you had just started on the A320. What experiences did you have leading up to that?
Well, I've been working for U.S. Airways for 24 years. I started out as a flight engineer on a 727, which they still flew then, and I became a first officer on that. And when they parked those airplanes, I flew DC-9 for a long time. That's still my highest time aircraft, DC-930. I was a captain on the Fokker for a number of years, a Fokker 100. And right prior to being trained on the A320, I was a 737 first officer for about 8 years.
So now there's a wide variation in aircraft. What do you think are the differences between those aircraft you flew?
Well, you know, my favorite airplane will always be the DC-9. I just thought that was a perfect airplane for the usage, that it was simple, it was easy to understand, the systems were very easy, it was the perfect airplane for that role. Unfortunately, they don't make them anymore, and the Douglas Aircraft Company doesn't exist anymore.
Did you find it difficult jumping in from aircraft to aircraft, or do you think the experience has sort of bled into learning the new systems?
Well, in the airline world, I actually have flown relatively few airplanes. Most people jump airplane to airplane much faster than that. But obviously, the A320 and the Fokker 100 are the most sophisticated airplanes I flew. I did get the opportunity to fly the A380 last fall. They invited us, both Sully and I, over, and Sully went in June, and I went over in October to Toulouse, France, and actually got to fly the airplane for 2 hours. Not just the simulator, but actually fly in the airplane, and that was quite something.
That moment that the 320 hit the water, what were you experiencing? What was going through your head?
Well, I mean, I was always real positive about it. Obviously, initially, we thought we were going to restart an engine and then fly back to an airport. And obviously, that became something we couldn't do. But after that, I was always positive. I thought, why couldn't we land this airplane in the water? It's been done before, and we did it too.
What sorts of things, the senses, the auditory, the feelings, what sorts of things were happening at the exact moment that it touched down?
Well, at the exact moment that it touched down, I mean, it banged on the tail fairly hard, but then it seemed like it was flowing, or the water just flowed over the airplane. It just, you know, cascaded over the windshield. It seemed like we were going to the bottom of the river. But then it popped up in that tail-low attitude that you saw in the pictures, and it was just kind of bobbing back and forth in the waves a little bit. And I turned to Sully and I said, well, that wasn't so bad. It was just over in just moments, you know, and then next thing was to evacuate the airplane. I stayed behind and conducted the emergency evacuation checklist, but Sully had to jump up because for some reason we lost all battery power, so our public address system wasn't powered, and nobody knows why that happened exactly. But he had to jump up and command the evacuation verbally and help the flight attendants get the rafts inflated.
So they say it was about 3.5 minutes from the time that things started to go wrong until you were back on the water. Did you have a chance to tell the crew in the back anything about what was actually going on and what your plans were?
They didn't know that we'd even landed on water until they opened the door and saw the river. All we were able to do was give the brace for impact command.
You've been through the experience and you know what to expect in a ditching situation now. Is there anything you'd add to the training that regular airline pilots get in order to better prepare for such an incident?
All the training we've ever had has been essentially out of a book. That really wasn't of any benefit at all to us. It's similar to landing on a runway, but it's not the same as landing on a runway, and it might be something that some actual simulator training might help.
Was there anything that surprised you about the experience? Was it what you were expecting if you think back to it theoretically, learning about ditching?
Well, I guess whenever we talked about ditching, we always said, yeah, right, like we're ever going to be able to survive that. And of course we did. So I never really expected that it would be something that, you know, was something you could successfully do. But of course I didn't really ever look into it.
So you gained a lot of fame. If they were to make a movie about this incident,
Who would be the ideal person to have play you in the movie?
From my perspective, Brad Pitt.
Flat spins are considered unrecoverable. Aerobatic pilot Neil Spooner entered a flat spin, which is usually fatal. It was caught in dramatic detail with an onboard camera. He was one of the lucky pilots who lived to tell about it. But was it luck or skill? To find out, the Aviators UK correspondent caught up with him at his home airfield.
Neil's kindly joined us by his aircraft. So Neil, what first got you into flying?
It was my wife's fault. She bought me a trial lesson in 1988, and it all went steadily downhill from there with my private pilot's licence. And I always wanted to go commercial, which I eventually did. Why the Nipper? I saw Barry Smith campaign a tipsy Nipper many, many years ago. It must have been about 1986, and I have to say he put on a very, very good show with it. And I thought, well, if you can do that with sort of 1,800 cc's of Volkswagen burning 3 gallons of petrol an hour, then really it's a very, very affordable way of doing aerobatics. And for my level of aerobatics, it really does everything. Full inverted fuel systems, oil systems, so I can leave it upside down all day for as long as I feel happy on the straps.
You uploaded a video to YouTube of you and your aircraft doing 26 flat spins. Can you talk us through what happened?
Yeah, I have to say it caught me very much by surprise. I always thought that the flat spin was the province of more thoroughbred aircraft than the tipsy Nipper. It's a very good forum, particularly in the aviation world, to offer insight into what can happen.
Can you take us through the video itself, please, Neil?
Of course. Watching the video, I have to say, I still have a little bit of trouble with, but initially a clearing turn, and this is the bit that I always hate, where throttle back and start to pitch up into the stall. The mistake I made was using full aileron to help initiate the stall from a fully stalled condition with quite an aggressive rudder input. I knew the spin had gone flat very, very quickly. Within half a turn I thought this doesn't look right. The nose attitude isn't as low as it should be, and the rate of rotation is different, and applied normal spin recovery technique. Made absolutely no difference. The tail group felt like they were actually disconnected from the controls. There's absolutely no aerodynamic loading at all. Absolutely no effect. Some control loading on the ailerons themselves, and that was the only control surface I got any feedback on. So I thought that would probably be the key to getting me out, and by using in-turn aileron, this is a spin to the right, in-turn aileron, what you're effectively doing is the down-going aileron produces some drag, which helps oppose the yaw of the aircraft, and that helped, along with forward stick, help the nose go down, the aircraft to roll into a normal erect spin, from which it was simplicity itself to recover from. It's just instinct.
How did you feel?
At that stage, incredibly disorientated. You cannot imagine just how disorientated. I couldn't read the instruments. Initially, just staying strain level for a number of seconds was all I could really do. Once I'd got control of the aircraft back and a few of my sensors back, scanned for somewhere to land out and turned into wind and spotted the area to land, the fact that somebody had erected a barbed wire fence that was invisible to me was the fly in the ointment.
What did you learn from the experience?
Proper spin entry is one thing. It was a mishandled spin entry by using full aileron to initiate the spin, which in this case I didn't need to do because it's from a fully stalled state.
What would be the one piece of advice you would give someone?
Be very aware of the fact that their aircraft will not always do what they anticipate. On this occasion, because I was entering the spin from a slightly different control input set, I added 500 feet, which I always do to anything new when I'm practicing. That 500 foot saved my life because I can only estimate, because I couldn't read the instruments, I came out of the manoeuvre at around about 500 to 700 feet. And essentially good training. Good training, I think, is the way to go. If you are going to aerobat an aircraft, you need to know about these corners of the flight envelope, which really you never know when you're going to enter.
Aviators, for everyone who has ever gazed skywards.
For more information on today's segments, visit www.theaviators.tv.